Thanks for joining me on the Jason in the House podcast.
Thank you. Thank you, Jason. Thanks for having me, man.
You know, the Senate is supposed to be the most deliberative body on the face of the planet, but
right.
Doesn't really seem like that.
No, the Senate, well, I am pleased with this part of the Senate, and that is that we really try hard to be as civil as we can. Mm-hmm. But the truth is you don't have to be crazy to serve in the U.S. Senate. They will happily train you, Jason. And the Senate only seems to work when all of us aren't crazy at the same time. That's just the way it is. You put 100 people together, all of whom have big egos, all of whom think they're brand names like Lululemon, but 70% of whom think they ought to be president. And what you get is what you get.
Now, I served over in the House, and it was rambunctious to say the least, and had many of those same qualities, but we also had quantity. And to say that it was civil all the time, boy, that just wasn't how people were going to get on their Instagram.
Well, the House, as you well know, is different. I love the House. But in the House, there are a lot more folks. They have smaller constituencies. In the media world today, everybody is, of course, competing for attention because in the world today, power is attention. The Senate is a little different. We're smaller. We're together every day. We know each other well. Your friend today on a bill might be your enemy tomorrow and vice versa. And some of it is just personality. I don't hate anybody. I don't. I look for grace wherever I can find it. When I say my prayers, I ask God, don't let me hate. And I don't hate anybody. And I like all my colleagues, but some I like better than others. I'll put it that way.
Well, that's fair enough. You know, some of the best advice I got, you know, it's just the common sense of you can disagree, just don't be disagreeable. But Senator, I got to tell you, I'm a huge fan of what you do and how you do it, especially when it seems, and this is my observation, you get somebody coming to testify before you, whether it's for a confirmation hearing or whatnot, and it's obvious to me you don't think they're necessarily up to the job. What's your approach to that when you're looking at somebody and you're looking at their work and staff's done their work to help prep you and they start answering questions and you just think, you know what, I'm going to ask them some simple questions and let's see how they do, because that seems the way when you're at your best.
Well, my staff and I both spend a lot of time examining the backgrounds of the people that the president, any president, nominates. These are positions of great power, or they wouldn't be before the Senate for confirmation. And we can't afford to make a mistake. A federal judge, for example, you know, just because you've seen My Cousin Vinny doesn't qualify you to be a federal judge. And President Biden sent us over some people who were political activists first and lawyers second. And they had very checkered backgrounds. I don't really care that much about person's politics on the federal bench as long as they're going to apply the law even-handedly and not try to rewrite Constitution every other Thursday to advance some political or social agenda that they can't get by the voters. And a lot of President Biden's people did that. In contrast, we've turned down over 2 terms some of President Trump's nominees, maybe 5 or 6. And anytime I have given them a hard time in committee, I've gotten a call from the president, and every single time he said, look, call them like you see them. If my administration sends you over a skillet head who doesn't belong in the job, then knock them, slap them to Pluto. Do what you have to do. And he's pretty good about that.
Well, and you're pretty good at questioning them. So let's go back to I was born in, like not the year, but where, and walk us through, because, you know, my guess is this is true with most people. They didn't start their life thinking, oh, yeah, I'm destined. I'm headed to D.C. That's where I'm going, baby. So where did you go off the rails and decide, hey, yeah, DC's for me? But go back and tell us a little bit more about growing up. What was life like for you as a young man?
Well, I grew up, Jason, thanks for asking, in a little small town, about 3,000 people, outside of Baton Rouge, a fairly rural community. I loved it. I loved high school. I know a lot of people didn't. I'd go back to high school in a second. I cared about two things in high school. I cared about basketball and cheerleaders. And I wasn't very good at either one, but I had a lot of fun trying. Zachary was very small, a small town. If you're not from one, if you are, you'll know what I mean. A small town is where everybody knows everybody's business. Yeah. Everybody knows whose check is good and whose husband isn't. And my parents stressed education. My brothers, I have three brothers, we all started working early. We understood, because our parents insisted, the value of both hard work and education. And then I went away to college and law schools for a long time. I liked school a lot. I put it off as long as I could, but eventually I had to join the real world when I came back to Louisiana. And how I got in politics by accident. I was a lawyer. I got in by accident, but I liked it. And people say, well, why did you go to law school? And I tell them, well, because I couldn't get into med school. I've got two brothers who are doctors, and God bless them. Your life never turns out like you plan it. Somebody really smart once said, life is what happens to you when you're planning for the future. But I love the Senate. You have good days, bad days. You never have a boring day. I love policy. If I want to, for example, go learn about the chronic disease management program in Medicaid in Florida, I can do that. Right. That sort of stuff interests me. I couldn't do that when I was teaching and practicing law, because, when you're practicing law, you got to learn the stuff that your clients want you to learn. Otherwise, they don't pay you.
What kind of law were you practicing?
I did a lot of litigation, some plaintiffs' work, a lot of defense work, a lot of products liability, a lot of commercial litigation. I did a little bit of what we call transactional work, sort of paperwork, if you will, but I was mostly in a courtroom.
So let's go back. You're going to grade school. You're trying to shoot hoops. You're in a small town. But then, like you mentioned, okay, you had to get serious about life. But what happened? Like, what was your first job?
My first job was picking up trash on a construction site. My dad was a small businessman. He owned a little lumber company, and he built some houses. And my job was he had a construction crew of 5 or 6 men. And I remember, I think I was about 11. It was the summer. It was hot. I went out. Dad said, you're going to pick up trash. And I remember he called all of the men together, and he stood next to me, and he said, son, you see these men? I said, yes, sir. He said, every one of them is your boss. And then Dad said to the men, he said to me, he said, if any one of these men who are your bosses tells you to go take a crap in the middle of the street, you do it. I was horribly embarrassed, but I got the point. And I worked in, I was a cashier in a convenience store. I put on shingles on a roof. I cut grass. I bush hogged fields. I never worked as a waiter. That's one thing I sort of miss doing. I kind of wish I'd done it, because you learn a lot about people.
It just seems today, I've always been, personally, I'm opposed to the minimum wage. I think it's wrong. I think if you don't, you transact with somebody, I'll pay you this. If you're willing to do it, you do it. If they're not willing to do it, maybe you need to pay them more, and you find that equal balance. But one of the things that's a consequence of the minimum wage is you have these young people like yourself, like myself, who they miss out on these opportunities when they're, 13, 14, 15 years old to work for somebody else and learn how to work hard and take direction and get kicked around a little bit. I seem to think that's healthy, but boy, Democrats fight that tooth and nail as if you're supposed to be making 20, 25 bucks an hour as a 15-year-old.
Well, my parents emphasized two things, education and hard work. We learned how to work. I guess every generation says, the new generation is not up to snuff. But about a year ago, I was talking to a constituent of mine who runs a small business. And I said, are you having trouble getting people to take jobs? He said, yeah, I really do. He said, part of it is they've got to pass a drug test, but part of it is they don't have work ethic. And I said, what do you mean? He said, I'll give you an example. I hired a young man that I thought was promising, came to work. He worked Monday. He worked Tuesday. He didn't show up on Wednesday, but he showed up on Thursday. So he said, I went to this young man and said, where were you yesterday? He said, I was tired and I just didn't feel like coming to work. And he said, at first I thought the kid was just screwing with me, but I looked at him right now and he said he was serious. And I said, son, it doesn't work like that. You rest on the weekends. You can't just rest in the middle of the week. But he said, this kid never was taught how to work. And I hear that kind of thing over and over and over again.
Yeah, I think that's part of the challenge. And all right, so you're working, you're doing all kinds of different things. But again, what did you get your undergraduate in?
I went to Vanderbilt University. I did an undergraduate degree in three things: political science, philosophy, and economics. I loved all three. Then I went to law school, University of Virginia. Then I clerked for a federal judge, which was a terrific experience. And then I wasn't ready to go to work for a living. I had a chance to come to work for a senator on Capitol Hill, but I wanted to go back to school. And so I applied and got another law degree from Oxford University in England, which was a rare and wonderful experience. I stayed in academia, and a clerkship is just an extension of academics. I stayed in school, 10 years. And then finally I just said, well, I want to eat and live indoors, and I can't do it without money. So I went to work for a living.
Yeah, our son actually went to UVA Law School. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. And
that's a great law school.
Yeah, that's a great school. So you're going along, you're doing that, but then what happened? You mentioned something here where, you woke up one day and said, by the end of the day, you said, yeah, I think I'm going to get into politics. What happened that day?
Well, I was practicing law, earning a good living. I had supported a gentleman for governor and done a few policy papers for him. I think I'd given him $500 to help him. Nobody expected him to win. He was a reform governor running against the infamous Governor Edwin Edwards. And Governor Romer won. And one day I'm sitting in my office working away, and my secretary came in and said, Governor-elect Romer's on the phone. And I said, Kim, stop joking around. I got work to do. She said, no, it's really the governor-elect. So I took the call, and Buddy, Governor Romer, said, Kennedy, I need a lawyer. I've heard that you will do it. And so he said, I want you to come to Baton Rouge for a few weeks and help me out. Well, he was the governor-elect. So I talked to my law partners, and they said, okay, you can go up there a few weeks. And I did. And a few weeks became 3.5 years. And that's how I got started in politics. And I liked it. I enjoyed it. It was frustrating sometimes. It was rewarding sometimes. But just like the Senate, I had good days and I had bad days, but I never had a boring day. And I earned a good living practicing law. But, practicing law, it gets a little boring sometimes, particularly if you're working on a case that doesn't especially interest you. So I like the freedom of politics. So long as I can get elected, I can sort of do what I want. And I do, and I don't try to bubble wrap things. Most people know where I stand on things. They may not like it, and I say what I think. I play outside the pocket. God created all of us to be unique individuals, and I have the right to remain silent, but God did not give me the ability. So I just say what I think. I'll let her rip.
There you go. There's that story I was told before I was elected to the House. So I went and saw this 22-year veteran of the House, a guy named Jim Hansen. He was from Utah. And I went and saw him, and I said, sir, I don't know what I don't know, so tell me what I need to know. And he told me, he said, you are going to walk onto that floor of the House, you're going to think, how did I get there? But then after about 6 months, things are going to change. It's like, I'm sitting on the edge of my seat, and he says to me, yeah, about 6 months, you're going to go in, have that same experience, chill down your spine. How did I get here? But then you're going to look around and you're going to say, how did they all get here? Like, did anybody meet these people? How did they get elected? And it was so true. It was so true.
That is good advice. Good advice. The problem with Washington, D.C., and the federal government in general is that common sense is illegal. There are a lot of smart people in Washington. There are a lot of smart people in the Senate, smarter than me. But when I feel inadequate, I just look around, and then I feel better because you know what I'm about to say, Jason. I look around at some of these high IQ stupid people, and you wonder, how did these people make it through the birth canal? Their ideas equate to, well, let's just do the worst thing possible that won't work. Let's just do the dumbest thing possible that won't work. Can Washington get better? Yes. But the water in Washington, D.C. is not going to clear up till you get the pigs out of the creek. And we got a lot of pigs there.
Well, look, our founders envisioned that it was, the House, the Senate, the presidency, the way our republic is set up. It's not a glide path to do things quick and easy.
Right.
But what do you see are Trey Gowdy and I talk about this a lot. We served roughly the same time. The social media component, really, you could almost just see it, where people would actually do stuff, and then they started doing stupid stuff because they'd had to have some young staffer come stand in front of them, and they were making a YouTube video or an Instagram post, as opposed to actually doing the work that we were supposed to be doing in the House. Here's
what happened with the shutdown. It was just bone deep down to the marrow stupid. The country was 7 weeks ago was rocking along. We were minding our own business. Our budget was about to run out, but we were negotiating with the Democrats. Republicans were on a new budget. And Senator Schumer, he comes to us and he says, well, I'm going to vote to shut down government if you don't give me $1.5 trillion, and I'm going to tell you how to spend it. And by the way, we want you to gut the one big beautiful bill that we just passed, and we want you to extend the Obamacare subsidies permanently. Well, we all looked at each other, and I mean, my attitude was I'd rather have a back alley colonoscopy than vote for that. And Senator Schumer knew it was an unserious offer. He was trying to shore up his own personal politics with the loon wing of his party. Because he, in part, has Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez breathing down his neck. And Senator Schumer knew exactly what he was doing, but he put the country through all this pain for 7 weeks. Republicans never budged because what he was demanding was so ridiculous. We weren't going to do it. And then finally, he had to go to a few of his Democratic colleagues and say, look, do me a favor, vote to open it back up, but I can't support you, and I may have to dog cuss you a little bit to make it look good, but I'm trying to get the Bolshevik wing, the loon wing of my party to love. And we went through all of that. I mean, that's what I mean when I say common sense is illegal in Washington. And Chuck gambled and he lost. You know, last time I saw him, he was wandering around the Senate floor looking like a guy who just lost his luggage at the airport. Now the loon wing of his party is even angrier at him. So what was accomplished? Nothing.
I'm amazed by how pathetic it was, because they walked out of there with nothing. They didn't, but
they got zero.
The problem is if your core principle, if your core tenet, the core of what you're fighting for is unreasonable, unattainable, and not true that resonates with the American people, you'll never win that fight.
You won't.
Let me ask you this.
Sure.
Donald Trump will arguably be one of the most, if not the most consequential, presidents we've ever had. What do you see about President Trump that he's doing that the Democrats are just totally oblivious to? Because they still don't get him. Maybe they do and they fake it, but I think a lot of them just don't understand the appeal that he has from coast to coast.
Well, President Trump had never been in politics before. He really hadn't spent time in Washington.
Right.
So he came in unblemished, if you will. President Trump is successful because he understands common sense. He was a very practical businessman. He was elected, I think, Jason, because he doesn't try to pretend to be something he isn't.
Right.
Yes, he's made a lot of money, but he doesn't talk down to people. I particularly identify with this trait. He plays outside of the pocket. When people go to him and say, Mr. President, you can't do it that way because it's never been done that way. The president will say, my words, not his. Well, I understand it's never been done that way, but the way we've been doing it forever sucks. So I'm going to do it differently. And that it drives the Democrats crazy, and their hatred of him has become irrational. It really has. I said the other day, if President Trump came out in favor of breathing to live, the Democrats would hold their breath. That's how irrational it's become.
It's true. And I even after past elections, I still don't think they fully understand or appreciate how this billionaire New Yorker who's always, dressed in a tie and ready to go and, and working as hard as how he appeals to middle class Americans, how he appeals to younger generation. Like they don't get it. They don't understand it.
Well, he does stuff. And he, like most business people, this is the way I explained it anyway. If he's got to make 10 decisions a day, he'll make them. He won't hire a consultant or an expert.
That's right.
Or form a study committee. He'll make the decisions. And his attitude is, well, I'll get 7 of them right. 2 of them I might get wrong, but I can fix them later. And the third one, well, I just got it wrong. Okay. But we got to keep moving.
Yeah.
And that's the way he approaches things. And I find it refreshing. His style is not altogether my style. I told the president one time, I don't think he liked it, but I said, Mr. President, you seem to grow anxious when you have an unexpressed thought. And he looked at me and said, what do you mean, Jimmy? I said, Mr. President, you're the president. You don't have to say everything out loud, but he does. And he's unfiltered. And some people that aggravates, but I think a lot of people, they find it refreshing.
Yeah.
I remember when he holds a press conference every day. I remember when President Biden would hold a press conference every 6 months.
Yeah, with a preconditioned card of people he was going to call on who are the chosen ones on his card if he could just read the card right. Yeah, I think the unfiltered, unvarnished, I'm going to tell you exactly what I'm thinking. I think that authenticity wins the day. I think you have it. I think the president has it. I think those that are the most successful are authentic, and you can't fake your way through that. Gavin Newsom tries to, but he is the total total opposite of authentic.
Well, Governor Newsom, first he's got pretty hair. I'll give him that. He's got very pretty hair. But Governor Newsom is going to try to run for president on his record in California, and lots of luck with that. Look, I love California. I think it's a great state. Wonderful people, beautiful natural resources, abundant natural resources. But if I were running California, what I'd do is just tell all these smart people, I'm going to get government off your backs. Now just go forth and grow and multiply. But he doesn't do that.
No.
Newsom is one of these guys who believes that America, the federal government made America great, or in his case, the state government made California great. That's not what made America great. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things made America great.
That's right.
And in many cases, doing it in spite of the federal government, not because of.
Senator, I have a few kind of rapid questions I need to ask you that I
Sure, man.
have all the guests answer. I hope you don't mind, but I need to go through these with you. So
Ask me anything.
all right. A first concert you attended.
First concert I attended was it was in college, actually. A performance of you remember the musical Hair, Hair?
Yeah.
That was the first concert I attended. I think the second concert I attended was a Meatloaf concert. I loved Meatloaf. I just thought he was one of the greatest rock stars. And I actually I never met him, but I got to talk to him one day on the phone. I just thought he was a total banger, man.
Yeah, an amazing voice. Amazing voice. What was your high school mascot?
Broncos. We were the Bucking Broncos. That's B as in bucking. Bucking Broncos.
You know, out in the Intermountain West where we are, we have a lot of Broncos and horses, but we actually have a lot of Broncos and horses. So that's interesting that Louisiana, you would have that. But yeah, good high school name, right?
Amen.
And it's a good high school, like basketball, football name. It's great. What's your superpower? Like, I believe everybody has a superpower. Like, hey, you know what? I'm actually pretty good at that. You may not admit it out loud, but what is yours? What can you do that maybe not everybody else can do?
Jason, I'm not trying to be humble here. I'm not sure I have a superpower. I mean, I think to the extent I've had success in life, it's been because I learned how to work. You know, I went to school with people who were much smarter than me. They really were. Not just at Oxford, but at University of Virginia Law. Same way. I mean, your son must be brilliant to get into that school today. But nobody, there might have been people who were smarter than me. There were, but they couldn't outwork me. And that's something my dad taught me. His attitude was, you know, if you get tired, you rest. You don't quit. You fall down. There's an old, I think it's a Chinese proverb. It says, no, it's a Japanese proverb. Fall down 7 times, get up 8. You know.
Yeah.
So if I have a superpower, and I'm not convinced I do, it's that I was taught not to quit.
Well, I'm gonna guess. That's great advice. I was going to ask you what the best advice is you ever got, but that fills that category. But
well, the best advice I ever got, and I don't remember who told me this, but it was a really smart person. He said, always be yourself unless you suck. And I thought that was an elegant way of putting it.
My take on your superpower is your clarity, that you can take a complex issue or a question and synthesize it down into something that everybody understands, and do so with a smile on your face. Not everybody can do that. Not everybody can. Even when I've seen you grilling somebody, it is painfully obvious they're not up to the job or answering the question. And you, in a very nice way, ask them the most difficult question because of its simplicity. And that gets lost on a lot of people in Congress. They ask this 4-minute question on a 5-minute clock, and then you can't remember what the beginning part of the question was. So you have that, and it is your superpower. I'm going to assign that one to you, whether you know it or not. But I think my guess is you actually do know that.
Well, that's kind of, you know this, Jason. A lot of people in Washington try to muddy the water to make it look deep. And I remember once under President Biden, we had an expert in front of us telling us how great electric vehicles were and why we had to spend billions of taxpayer money to subsidize them. And he went on forever. It was very eloquent. But it was when it was my turn to question him. I asked him a simple question. I said, "You think electric vehicles are great, do you not?" And he said, "Of course, yes." And I said, "Electric vehicles are so great. Why do we have to pay people to drive them?" He was speechless. He couldn't answer the question. But I try to ask questions that I think average Americans would ask.
Yeah.
They don't have, average Americans don't have time to sit around and listen to us honk on like a goose. They're too busy earning a living. But when they do have time, they want you to talk plainly and simply and not bubble wrap it.
Yeah.
And for better or worse, I try to do that. And there are others that do it pretty well too. You do it pretty well yourself, Jason. In fact, I've noticed since the House of Representatives went straight to hell after you left, man. Have you noticed
I keep telling everybody. I've told everybody that.
You left.
All right, I got two more quick questions.
Sure.
If you could meet one person, dead or alive, anybody in history, they're going to come over, break bread, you're going to have them share a meal together. Who would that person be?
Oh, it'd probably be several. I really would love to meet Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah.
You know, a simple man, in many people's estimation, a second-rate lawyer, but he had this inner strength, this inner courage. I would love to meet. I'd love to meet Darwin, to pick his brain about how he came up with his theory. The third who would I can me think? I have never met. I've shaken his hand, but I haven't really sat down and talked to him. I'd love to sit down and talk to Elon Musk. I just find him fascinating, and a lot of people like him. A lot of people don't. But I would love to have an hour with the guy. I'd buy him a beer, and try to pick his brain. And there are others I'd love to sit down and talk with, but
that's a pretty good list.
Those three. Yeah, I find those three especially interesting.
Yeah, for our time right now, Elon Musk, one of the most amazing people in our history, changing history as we speak. It's truly unbelievable what he's doing in his capacity to do so many things. It's really, truly amazing. And Abraham Lincoln, I couldn't argue. I totally agree with you there. That would be fascinating. All right, Senator, one more question.
Sure.
Pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
Short answer, no. Long answer, hell no.
That's a great answer. The judges love that answer. We've been talking.
No way, man.
Senator, very generous of your time. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks. You're a total banger, Jason. Thank you for having me, man.
Yeah, man. You used banger next to meatloaf and me. You've just made my day.
Absolutely. You're also a total baller. You're a rock star. You're what cool looks like, Jason.
Thank you, Senator. I really, truly appreciate it. Have a great day, and thanks for joining us on the Jason in the House podcast.
Thank you, man. Love your show.